Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. August 8th, The Golden Lion Gate. Story 1. Sekhmet, the Solar Lioness. Before the desert had swallowed the temples of ancient Egypt, and while the Nile still carried offerings towards cities whose names would one day become ruins, the Egyptians imagined the power of the sun as something far greater than warmth. Sunlight gave life, ripened grain, and awakened the world each morning. But beneath the same blazing disk stretched a heat capable of scorching the earth. That fierce solar power took divine form in Sekhmet, the lioness goddess whose name is commonly understood as the Powerful One. Daughter of the sun god Ra, and associated with his terrible eye. Sekhmet embodied a paradox the Egyptians understood well. The power that protects life can also destroy whatever threatens its order. One ancient account, preserved in the Book of the Heavenly Cow, tells of a time when humanity rebelled against Ra. The aging sun god heard of their defiance and gathered the gods to decide what should be done. At last, his eye was sent against the rebels, taking the form of a terrifying goddess often identified with Haethar, Sekhmet. She descended upon the earth with the fury of the desert sun, and humanity discovered that divine radiance was not always gentle. Sekhmet hunted those who had risen against Ra, and blood stained the land. But soon her rage became greater than the punishment that had summoned it. Ra saw that if she continued, humanity itself might be destroyed. Strength had become excess. The king of the gods therefore devised another way to stop her. Vast quantities of beer were prepared and colored red, traditionally described as being mixed with a red substance so that the liquid resembled blood. It was poured across the land before Sekhmet. Seeing the crimson pools, the lioness drank deeply. The beer overwhelmed her. Her fury subsided, and humanity survived. The story does not diminish Sekhmet's strength. Instead, it reveals why her power was sacred. Sekhmet could destroy, but she could also protect. She was invoked against enemies and disease, yet she was simultaneously associated with healing, and her priests became connected with medicine. Pharaohs claimed her ferocity in battle because a ruler was expected to defend Ma'at, the divine order of truth and balance. Countless statues portrayed Sekhmet seated or standing with the head of a lioness and a solar disk above her, a reminder that sobriety carried the heat of the sun within it. But the myth also places a boundary around her. Radiance without restraint becomes scorching. Courage without wisdom becomes violence. Authority without balance begins consuming the very world it was meant to protect. Sekhmet therefore offers something more complicated than the command to simply become powerful. She asks us to know our strength well enough to govern it. There are moments when we must bare our teeth, defend what matters, speak clearly, or refuse to shrink ourselves for another person's comfort. Yet there are also moments when true sobriety means knowing when the battle is finished. The lioness does not become less powerful when she rests. The sun does not become less radiant when evening comes. Power becomes sacred when we carry it without allowing it to carry us. Story 2. Haetae, the guardian of fire and justice. In the old stories of Korea, there was said to be a creature capable of recognizing something human eyes often struggled to see: the difference between what was merely claimed to be right and what was truly just. It was called the Haetae, also known as Haetae, a legendary guardian usually portrayed with the powerful body of a lion-like beast, a horn upon its head, and an expression fierce enough to warn wrongdoing away before punishment was ever necessary. The Haetae belonged to a broader East Asian tradition of a justice-detected creature, but in Korea it developed a particularly powerful identity of its own. It became associated with law, judgment, protection, and eventually the defense against one of the most dangerous forces threatening a city built largely from wood: fire. According to tradition, Haetae possessed an extraordinary ability to recognize guilt. When confronted with a dispute, it could distinguish the innocent from the dishonest and would charge or strike the person who had acted unjustly. For this reason, images of the creature came to stand near palaces where human authority was exercised, silently reminding judges, officials, and rulers that power did not make a person righteous. Authority itself was supposed to answer to justice. Centuries later, during Korea's Joseon dynasty, that symbolism found a striking home in the royal capital of Hongyeong, present-day Seoul. The great palace of Gyeongbokgung stood beneath the mountains, its wooden halls representing the authority of the king. Yet the landscape carried another concern. Wonoksan, a mountain south of the palace, was traditionally associated through geomantic belief with powerful fiery energy. Fire was not an abstract danger in a city of timber buildings. One uncontrolled blaze could devour homes, temples, government buildings, and palace halls. Stone Haetae, therefore, came to be placed near important royal spaces, where the legendary beasts associated with suppressing fire made it a guardian against destructive flame. This gives Haetae an unusual place with today's stories of solar sobriety. Unlike Sekhmet, it does not represent the blazing sun itself. Instead, it asks what happens when we possess fire and must decide how that fire will be used. The Haetae stands between flame and destruction, between authority and corruption, between impulse and judgment. Its lesson is not to extinguish power, but to give power direction. A ruler may possess enormous influence, yet without justice, that influence becomes dangerous. A person may carry tremendous passion, yet without discernment, passion can scorch indiscriminately. The Haetae therefore guards a threshold every powerful person eventually encounters. Can I remain strong without being destructive? Can I stand boldly without abandoning fairness? That is another form of radiance. We often imagine shining as becoming louder, brighter, or more visible. But sometimes the most powerful light is the one that reveals what is true. The Haetae does not ask us to surrender our fire. It asks us to become worthy of carrying it. Story 3, Mithra, Lord of the Radiant Covenant. Across the ancient Iranian world, dawn carried more than warmth. When the first light spilled over the mountains and exposed the earth beneath it, the radiance belonged to a divine order in which promises mattered, truth mattered, and nothing done beneath the open sky could remain hidden forever. Within this world stood Mithra, an ancient Iranian divinity of covenant, watchfulness, loyalty, and the protection of agreements. Mithra was not originally the sun god himself, as he is sometimes described in modern retellings, but his connection with light was unmistakable. In the Muryash, an ancient Zoroastrian hymn dedicated to him, Mithra is portrayed as ever watchful, surveying the lands and guarding the agreements made between people. He moves across the world with extraordinary power, accompanied by divine forces and associated with the brightness of day. Nothing escapes his gaze. A promise spoken in secret still matters. An oath made between enemies still binds them. A ruler may command armies and possess enormous wealth, but if that ruler breaks faith, Mithra stands against him. This made Mithra's radiance different from simple glory. His light revealed character. Kings and warriors could call upon him, but they could not purchase his favor merely through status. The covenant itself had to be honored. In the ancient Iranian imagination, this principle reached far beyond personal promises. Agreements helped hold society together. Treaties prevented bloodshed. Loyalty bound communities. Truth created stability between people who might otherwise become enemies. To violate a solemn agreement was therefore not merely dishonest, It threatened the order upon which civilization depended. Mithra became one of its guardians. Later, Iranian imagery and royal symbolism increasingly brought together ideas of divine radiance, kingship, victory, and legitimate rule, creating an enduring relationship between light and sovereignty. But the oldest lesson surrounding Mithra remains beautifully demanding. Power does not place you above your word. Power makes your word matter more. A sovereign who cannot be trusted is not strengthened by authority. Authority merely enlarges the consequences of the betrayal. This is why Mithra belongs within the Golden Lion Gate, even without needing to turn him into a literal lion god. His story asks what happens after we claim our right to shine. Once others can see us, what will our light reveal? Confidence without integrity becomes performance. Leadership without loyalty becomes domination. Radiance without truth becomes glare. Mithra offers another vision of sobriety, one in which a person's brilliance is measured by the promises they keep when no applause follows. The sun eventually reaches every hidden corner of the landscape, and Mithra's watchful light carried much of the same warning. Live so that what is revealed does not contradict what you proclaim in darkness. Perhaps that is the deeper challenge of stepping fully into our own power. We are not simply being asked to become visible. We are being asked to become trustworthy enough to remain ourselves once we are seen. Story 4. The Lion Beneath the African Sun. Across the open grasslands of East Africa, sunlight does not simply illuminate the landscape, it transforms it. Dawn spills gold across the savanna, midday burns against the horizon, and evening turns the grasses copper as cattle move toward home beneath an enormous sky. For the Maasai, whose traditional homelands stretch across present-day Kenya and Tanzania, cattle have long stood at the center of community life, while courage, responsibility, and protection became especially important ideas for generations of young warriors known as Ilmuran. And sharing those grasslands with cattle and people was another powerful presence, the lion. Lions were dangerous. They could threaten livestock upon which families depended, and encountering one demanded extraordinary caution and courage. Yet the lion was never simply an enemy to be hated. Its strength made confronting one serious, dangerous, and meaningful. Historically, under particular circumstances, Maasai warriors participated in lion hunts, including hunts associated with defending livestock and traditions through which courage could be demonstrated. A young warrior facing a lion entered an encounter where reputation meant nothing if fear controlled him. The lion did not care who his family was, what promises he had made, or how brave he had appeared beside the fire the night before. Beneath the exposed sky, courage had to become action. The Maasai ideas of bravery were never merely about reckless aggression. A warrior carried responsibilities toward cattle, family, fellow warriors, and community. Strength existed because something needed protecting. The distinction transforms a lion from a convenient symbol of dominance into something far more interesting. The lion represented power already fully expressed. It does not ask permission to occupy the landscape. Its roar travels across the plains, announcing its presence without explanation. To encounter such an animal was to confront power outside oneself and discover what kind of power existed within. Yet the Maasai relationship with lions has never been frozen in the past. As wildlife populations declined and conservation needs changed, some Maasai communities began transforming traditions surrounding lions themselves. In parts of Kenya, Maasai warriors, who might once have gained recognition through lion hunting, now participate in protecting lions, tracking them, warning herders when predators approach, and helping communities prevent retaliatory killings. Courage remains, but its expression evolves. The protector does not lose its strength because the thing he once confronted has become something he helps preserve. If anything, the responsibility becomes greater. That tradition carries a remarkable lesson for our Golden Lion Gate. Sovereignty is not proving that we are stronger than everything around us. It is becoming secure enough in our own strength that we no longer need destruction to demonstrate it. The lion beneath the African sun therefore becomes not a supernatural solar deity, but a living mirror of presence, courage, and responsibility. There are seasons when we must confront what threatens us. There are others when our greatest strength is demonstrated by what we choose to protect. Growing into our own authority means learning the difference. We were born to radiate, yes, but radiance does not require everything else to become smaller. The savannah has room for the warrior and the lion, for courage and restraint, for human communities and wild creatures, all standing beneath the same enormous sky. Daily Thread for August 8th. Where am I meant to rule my life boldly? There comes a moment when tending the flame is no longer enough. Eventually, we must stand within its light. Today's stories carry us into solar sobriety, not the power to stand above others, but the courage to stand fully within ourselves. Sekhmet, the fierce lioness of the Egyptian sun, showed us that power does not become sacred simply because it is strong. Her fire could protect or consume, reminding us that true sobriety means knowing when to unleash our strength and when to govern it. The Korean Haetae stood guard where authority met justice, revealing that power without discernment becomes dangerous, and that the strongest guardian is one capable of directing its fire toward protection rather than destruction. In ancient Iran, Mithra watched over promises beneath the light of heaven, teaching that authority means little if our words cannot survive being brought into the sun. And beneath the vast East African sky, the relationship between Maasai warriors and lions showed us another kind of courage, strength that grows beyond the need to prove itself and becomes powerful enough to protect what once challenged it. 4 very different traditions, yet each refuses to confuse sobriety with domination. Perhaps that is because the sun itself offers another model. It does not chase the planets, demanding recognition. It does not argue for its brightness. It simply burns according to its nature, and an entire world responds. There is something profoundly freeing in that image. So much of life can be spent waiting for permission to become visible, permission to speak, create, lead, change direction, set a boundary, pursue a calling, or simply occupy the space our lives already require. Yet radiance is not arrogance. There is a difference between believing ourselves greater than others and refusing to believe ourselves lesser. One demands that everyone else become smaller. The other finally stops shrinking. Perhaps that is what today's lion imagery asks us to consider. A lion does not apologize for the space its body occupies beneath the sun, but neither does it need to roar every moment to prove that it belongs there. Real confidence eventually becomes quiet. Real authority becomes responsible. Real strength learns what deserves protection. So ask yourself today, where have I surrendered authority over a part of my own life that belongs in my hands? Where am I waiting for someone else to declare me ready? Where have I mistaken making myself smaller for humility? And if I step completely into my own light, what would I actually do with it? Sekhmet asks us to master our power. Haetae asks us to make it just. Mithra asks us to make it trustworthy. The lion beneath the African sun asks us to make it protective. Perhaps this is what it truly means to radiate. Not to become so bright that others disappear, but to stand so completely within who we are that our presence gives others permission to stand fully within themselves too. You were not born to rule over everyone around you. You were born to become sovereign within your own life, to know your fire, choose what it serves, and stop apologizing for the light you were given to carry.